Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Nick Blumberg. Brandis Friedman is on assignment. Here's what we're looking at. The Cook County State's Attorney reverses course and is sending some gun possession cases to alternative courts.
You deserve a congressperson who shares your fight.
Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez throws his hat in the proverbial ring as he vies for Congressman Chuy Garcia's seat. He joins us to discuss the race. And changing requirements for SNAP recipients are coming. What you should know. First off tonight, $21 million. That's how much it costs to deploy National Guard troops to the Chicago area as of the end of December, according to the Congressional Budget Office. Despite President Donald Trump's intentions to have troops patrolling Chicago streets, federal courts blocked that move, a decision the Supreme Court upheld. Trump also sent federalized National Guard troops to Washington, D.C., Memphis, New Orleans, Los Angeles, and Portland, Oregon. The CBO says that cost nearly $500 million through the end of last year, and it could run some $1.1 billion this year if troops remain deployed. Tougher new rules for electronic monitoring. Chief Judge of Cook County Circuit Court is announcing 2 changes to the program, which has been under the microscope after a person released on electronic monitoring was charged with a violent random attack on a CTA rider. Under the new rules, major violations will go to the court for review within 24 hours on both weekdays and weekends. Previously, the court was only staffed to do so on weekdays. And what constitutes a major violation is also changing, from 48 hours of unauthorized absence to just 3 hours under the new protocols. In a statement, Chief Judge Charles Beach says these updates reinforce the court's commitment to timely judicial oversight and clear lines of responsibility. Governor J.B. Pritzker says the state has yet to decide whether it'll opt into a federal school voucher program, but that he's still concerned it could drain resources from public schools. Speaking at an unrelated event, the governor says his office is still reviewing the program, which was passed by Congress as part of the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. The program offers donors up to a $1,700 tax credit for donating to not-for-profits that offer students scholarships to private schools and cover other education-related costs. Pritzker told reporters that the federal government still has yet to release the final rules for the program, despite promising they'd be out weeks ago.
On its face, the question is this just a repeat of trying to take money out of public schools and move it into private schools, which is what the Trump administration, generally speaking, has been in favor of? Or is this something that could be useful? But we just don't know because there are no rules around it right now.
Opponents of the program rallied yesterday, urging the governor to reject school vouchers. Up next, why the Cook County State's Attorney is reversing a policy on gun possession cases. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
The Cook County State's Attorney has reversed course and is now diverting first-time nonviolent gun cases to the Restorative Justice Community Courts. In these courts, young people with nonviolent charges are sent to an alternative program with the charge dismissed upon completion. The move comes nearly a year after State's Attorney Eileen Burke instructed her office not to divert gun possession cases to the Restorative Justice Courts, which gutted the court's caseload. Our Blair Paddock joins us now with more. Now, Blair, what do we know about why the State's Attorney's office reversed its decision here?
Yeah, so they told me that they do believe in gun possession cases going to the RJCCs, but they took issue with how the gun possession cases were being handled in a previous iteration of the courts. So they said that they weren't confident in the gun possession education that was being provided to participants, and there wasn't a process to get a firearm owner identification card that they saw was streamlined. So now those cases are being sent back to the RJCCs starting earlier this month, and they said that there's more robust gun education provided to participants, and now participants can start the application for a FOID card while they're currently in the program and then receive it upon completion. Previously, they had to wait until they were done to even start the FOID card application process.
And for folks who aren't familiar with them, how exactly do these courts work?
Yeah, so they started it in 2017 as an alternative to incarceration for young people. So they take gun possession cases, some property-related cases, drug possession cases, and they get community together, the person who is harmed, in the cases where there is a person harmed, and they look at, what harm was done. They provide social services to folks like job training, counseling, mentorship, and upon completion, they can get the charge wiped from the record. It's specifically for young people in suburban Stock Village, Avondale, Inglewood, and North Lawndale, and so yeah, those are the programs.
So in those neighborhoods right now, and with certain kinds of cases, are there any efforts underway to expand eligibility?
There's definitely a want to expand eligibility. So I spoke with Judge Patricia Spratt. She's oversees the North Lawndale RJCC, and she would like violent cases to start to come to the RJCCs. The PD's office, Public Defender's office, said that they would also like expansion in the types of gun possession cases being seen. So they would like cases involving guns without serial numbers or guns with certain attachments to start making their way to the RJCCs.
All right, very interesting program. Blair Paddock, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And you can read Blair's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. The race to replace outgoing Congressman Jesús Chuy García has a new candidate. 25th Ward Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez officially announced his bid today. One of City Council's Democratic Socialists, he'll be running as an independent to represent the 4th Congressional District. Sigcho-Lopez sharply criticized Garcia's decision to announce at the last minute that he wouldn't run again, paving the way for his Chief of Staff, Patty Garcia, to take the Democratic nomination. And joining us to discuss the race is 4th District Congressional candidate Byron Sigcho-Lopez. He currently serves as 25th Ward alderperson, representing communities including Pilsen and Little Village. Welcome back to the program. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, you hadn't publicly talked about entering this race until Congressman Garcia announced very last minute that he wasn't going to run for re-election. What made you want to jump in?
Well, just hearing across the 4th Congressional District the need for representation. In a moment like this, we need to build coalition, and we got to do it by upholding our democratic values. We cannot challenge those who are rigging elections or want to be in power forever by rigging elections ourselves. So it was important for us to listen to constituents across the 4th Congressional District, suburban and urban areas, to work together to find solutions for the issues that we're facing as Americans across the country.
And of course, here in Cook County, Democratic candidates have a major advantage on the ballot. How are you looking to connect with voters to try and overcome some of that built-in advantage?
Well, with the support of our constituents, with the power of the people. So we're not strangers to being outspent, by big corporate PACs. That's what it was important for us to take our time to gather where people at, and I think that there is desire to elect independent leadership that is unbought. I am confident, and just by going to endorsement sessions from federal workers to teachers to people, homeowners, small businesses, the need is there, and I think that we will mobilize people, we organize people, and we organize the small donations to challenge the billionaire class.
Yeah, and speaking of mobilization as well, of course, there's the matter of getting on the ballot as an independent candidate requires nearly 11,000 valid signatures in your district. Are you feeling confident you'll be able to clear that hurdle?
Yes, and I think it's important. I know that there's many legal challenges, and they're being challenged, especially in Illinois, how difficult it is for independents to run. I was not given any other choice. In fact, I had no choice but to run as an independent. But I do think it's an exercise. I need to talk to people across the district. That is something I feel in my 7 years in office. I feel comfortable talking to people, gathering support from people across the aisle, and I feel excited about mobilizing, bringing our communities together to fight for a different world. Is really concerning what we see in our country, abroad and at home, the deployment of military forces to attack and murder even American citizens. It demands a bold action, and I think that will inspire people to come out, sign a petition, and vote for us.
And when you talk to folks across the district, what are the priorities that you hear? What are people concerned about?
Well, we hear people who are afraid, of course, of the deployment of federal troops to terrorize, to kidnap, to murder, as we saw in Minneapolis. But we also see the issues of affordability, rising cost of food, and then also SNAP benefits being cut. We see premiums of healthcare insurance going up drastically, leaving thousands of people without insurance. We see people struggling to make ends meet, to pay for rent, pay for mortgages. So we see an affordability crisis with a president who does not even know what affordability means. So it is important for us to challenge that with solutions. So we're there to listen to the issues and provide a proposal that we challenge the billionaire class, tax the rich and corporations, so that we can help our working people are struggling.
You know, you mentioned the ongoing and very aggressive immigration enforcement that's happening. You've been outspoken about calling for the abolition of ICE. Why abolition rather than reform? Why is that the right approach?
Well, we cannot reform a system that is murdering people in plain sight. We saw what happened to Alex Preddy, Nicole Renee Good, and also what we saw with Silverio Villegas Gonzalez here in our state. We cannot reform a system that is broken, that needs to be changed. We've been calling for abolishing ICE for years. Now it became convenient. We cannot reform a system that now is recreating its slave catchers. That's why we see people running for terror. And we not only need to abolish ICE, we need to find accountability. We need to prosecute and arrest those unfortunately badly called law enforcement. There's nothing about lawful for people who do not respect the law. We need to bring them in front of justice, as the DA in Philadelphia has already called for.
You know, some Democrats have called on the state of Illinois to redraw its congressional maps to try and counter Republican efforts to pick up seats in the House, although that hasn't really gained any traction locally. But do you think Illinois should change its maps, or should it leave them as is?
Well, I think it is important that we don't have politicians choosing their voters. Voters need to choose their representatives. I think that we need to challenge, of course, by all democratic means, and showing that we can do it by challenging those decisions. I think that is important that as democratic values, that we don't rig elections in any way, shape, or form. That is the recipe of the Republican Party LLC. And I think for us, it's important that we uphold our democratic values by allowing voters to choose their representatives and do it with solutions and ideas and good platforms.
You know, as we mentioned, you're aligned with the Democratic Socialists of America, a group that's really risen in prominence over the last decade or so, both in Chicago and nationally. Why do you think the DSA message is starting to connect more with voters?
Well, as we saw in New York when a new mayor was elected, Zoran Mondani showed a way to speak directly to working people, and their issues of affordability, healthcare, housing, public education, things that working people are suffering with, not being able to make ends meet. And I think that message of holding the billionaire class accountable is something that has become more and more evident with the federal government, a complete corrupt, perverted government. We are literally being run, our government at the federal level is run by pedophile billionaires who want to divide working people. I think that Democratic Socialists represent an alternative. I was elected in 2019, and I only seen that this become more and more a clear option of who represents working people and who represent the billionaire class. You
know, and on the flip side, for folks who may be more mainline Democrats, more moderate or conservative Democrats, how do you communicate with those voters about the ideas that you bring to this race?
Well, I think for way too long we have allowed the Republican Party to pretend to be that there's the party that understands business, that understands how to help a small business, when they're the first ones to destroy the small businesses with overtaxation, property taxes, and so forth. So we want to make sure that we talk to the issues of working people, talking about affordability, talking about small businesses, talking to people who are struggling to make ends meet, and providing real solutions. I think taxing millionaires, taxing the billionaire class, it is important effort so that we don't see property taxes raising every year. Healthcare insurance. We are a country, the richest country in the history of our planet, and it's unacceptable that we have people who cannot have access to public health care. We also have veterans who have been mistreated when they have been serving our country. We want to make sure that we expand those services, those benefits to veterans. So there's a lot of work to do. We've been working with people across the aisle. I used to represent, for instance, the Chinatown community. And in that community, even though they may be more conservative, we've been working together so that we are the only Chinatown in the country that is growing. Good economic solutions demand good platforms, and that is something that we can, I think that we can promote across the aisle.
We've got just under a minute left. Of course, there's a lot of action on the House side as well, but there are also 3 candidates currently competing for the Democratic nomination and the race to replace Senator Durbin. Are you planning to endorse any of those candidates?
Well, I'm looking at its funding sources. I know that we'll be challenging anybody who's funded by APAC, but we also going to make sure that we look at their solutions. What are they proposing for working people? So I'm looking very closely at that race. Is an important race. So we'll be still we've seen the debates, and it's healthy to see in a democracy an open race where we can vote on ideas and platforms. So I'll be waiting to make that decision.
All right, many open races this year, and a new candidate in one of them, Byron Sigcho-Lopez. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Up next, work requirements for food assistance benefits are changing. What that means for Illinois residents' eligibility.
Reflecting the people and perspectives that make up our communities, this story is part of Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices.
As many as 450,000 Illinois residents could soon lose their food assistance benefits under the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program known as SNAP. That's according to the Greater Chicago Food Depository, which is warning of new work requirements set to take effect on February 1st. The changes came as a result of the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill that became law this past summer. The Food Depository says it's gearing up for a new wave of food insecurity, but cautions that it can't handle the additional need alone. Joining us to discuss the potential impact of the changes are Nolan Downey, Senior Director of Policy at the Greater Chicago Food Depository, and Kenny Robinson, an Englewood resident and SNAP recipient. Thank you both for being here tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Nolan, can you walk us through the changes to the SNAP program that are set to take effect at the beginning of February?
Yeah, so what we're concerned about here is the expanded work requirements following the passage of H.R. 1. Now, SNAP recipients who are between ages 18 to 64, who don't struggle with any type of physical or mental limitation that impacts their ability to work, and also don't have children under age 14, are now going to have to start meeting new work requirements starting February 1st if they want to maintain their critical nutritional assistance.
And what happens if SNAP recipients can't meet those new work requirements?
Yeah, so under the work requirements, these recipients are going to have to work or participate in some type of volunteer or training activity for 80 hours a month. And if they don't do that, they only get 3 months of SNAP in a 3-year period. So we think about it sort of like baseball. It's 3 strikes and you're out. And sadly, we think a lot of people are going to be impacted by this.
You know, Kenny, I know you're worried that these upcoming changes haven't been clearly communicated to folks who rely on this program. Are you worried people who rely on SNAP know about the changes, or has that not been clear?
It's not clear. I mean, a lot of people understand that working 80 hours, anything can happen if they fall short of them 80 hours and get cut off, What if they get hurt on the job working for these food stamps, And everybody not on the same pay food stamp budget, Some get less than others, So working for $50 of stamps, for 80 hours a month, is that really fair?
Yeah.
I mean, what other benefits do we have? I mean, what else can we look forward to? What about permanent jobs, things of that nature? I am a participant, but I am really tired of being on stamps. I want to work. I want to earn a living. I mean, I don't want to be on this for the rest of my life. I've tried looking for jobs, but there are barriers out there that's holding me back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not always a question of, unwillingness or lack of motivation. It can be a lack of opportunity as well.
Yes, it is.
And I know you've been doing some volunteer work to make sure you're still eligible. Are you confident you'll be able to stay on SNAP after these changes take place?
I'm not sure of that. I don't know.
Nolan, SNAP recipients, as you mentioned, they've got basically 3 months to meet the new requirements or they'll be kicked out. But people can still get back on SNAP if that were to happen. Is that correct?
That's right. And I think Mr. Robinson's actually raising a really important point. Of course, if people lose those three strikes, they can get back on SNAP if they start meeting the work requirement again. If they meet those 80 hours a month or if they become exempt, they can get back on. But I think what Mr. Robinson is highlighting is really important because oftentimes most people who are on SNAP and able to work are working. Folks that aren't often face severe barriers to work. And as Mr. Robinson's highlighting, taking away people's food doesn't make it easier for them to get a job. We want people to be gainfully employed. We want people to have jobs that treat them fairly and pay them well, but taking away their food doesn't help with that. And the research over decades is clear, work requirements do not work.
And I mean, how about that idea that you'll hear folks who argue for work requirements saying, you know, oh, people are taking advantage of the system or they just don't want to work. Is that true in your experience?
No. Look at me, I'm 61 years old. I want to work, okay? Well, I got time left. I want to contribute, you know? I want to be able to get a paycheck, you know, an income check. You know what I'm saying? This once a month check I get from SNAP, it's not beneficial. It's once a month. I don't get nothing in between. I mean, bills are always late. Phone get cut off sometimes in the middle of the month. This is no way to live.
Yeah. And may I ask, I mean, how much are you seeing from SNAP each month?
$158 a month. That's all I get. And they want me to work for that.
Yeah, and the hours that you have to put in, you know, if you're doing a volunteer job, you know, you're not getting paid for that, so that doesn't generate any additional income for you.
Exactly. I mean, what about medical benefits? What if I get hurt on the job doing this for 80 hours for food stamp? What if I get hurt on the job? If they're going to pay my medical benefits, if I get severely hurt and can't take care of my family, working for these food stamps, what other benefits do we have? Or can we expect from the administration other than just working for our food stamps?
And what would you say to the folks in Congress or in the administration that have been supportive of these new changes, these new rules?
I'm speechless right now. What I want to say, I can't say, but they need to get it. They need to work on this. Really, they need to work on this.
Well, you know, and as we mentioned earlier, these new requirements are part of the One Big Beautiful Bill passed at the behest of President Trump. What rationale have we heard from folks in Washington about why they made this change?
Well, it's the rationale that you're getting at, and it's these same tired tropes and misconceptions about benefits recipients, that people are receiving these benefits, but that they don't want to work. And Mr. Robinson is highlighting this. He receives $158 a month. The average SNAP benefit per person is about $196. Nobody is turning down a good job because that's the amount that they're receiving. That benefit is important for people to supplement their grocery budgets, but that is not enough. And so I think a lot of the justification is around these misconceptions, but we should be very clear that the purpose of these expanded work requirements is to kick people off of benefits, and sadly, that is what I think we're likely to see.
And you mentioned, you know, it's a bit of a confusing system, this sort of 3 strikes, you know, that you basically don't get those 3 strikes back for another 3 years, but you're not kicked out of SNAP for another 3 years. Is that correct? As long as you are meeting these requirements.
Again, if you go back to meeting the requirements, you can get back on, but for so many people, there are barriers to work that they're not able to overcome. And taking their food assistance away does not make that situation any better. And so what the data shows us often is that people lose those benefits right after those 3 months and that they don't make their way back to the program. Again, if we're interested in people getting good jobs, what we need to do is support them with the food that they need while they're out there looking and trying to navigate this difficult job market, because that is what's going to help them be more successful. And again, the research has demonstrated that.
And you know, when these changes were put into place, how were you notified? Are they sending letters? Are they sending texts?
I got email and letter. I mean, my Propel app, which is hooked up to the SNAP program, told me, you know, I have to report when, you know, if I'm able to work. You know, I have to. They said the Big Beautiful Bill said that you have to work. You have that age limit. All that was coming through the text. Sent me a letter from the SNAP people saying you're eligible to work under the new program. And here I am.
So, you know, if maybe folks are living at a different address temporarily, or if they don't have access to their email, they could potentially be falling through the cracks. They might not know about this.
They sure can. Some people who don't have phones that's eligible to work might not get the emails, or who might be homeless, who don't have a mailing address, can miss the letter and get cut off their food stamps.
Yeah. And, you know, forgive me for sort of an obvious question, but, you know, if you're out there looking for a job and you don't have adequate food, if you're not sure where that's coming from, how challenging does that make it?
Very challenging. How you going to feed yourself? How you going to get the nourishment, the strength, if you don't have food? If you don't have food to sustain life, how you going to go out there and actually search for a job?
Yeah.
When you lacking food.
We've got about 30 seconds left, but Nolan, how is the Greater Chicago Food Depository preparing for a possible new surge of food insecurity?
We're going to do everything we can to try to meet this need, but as you highlighted at the jump, for every meal that SNAP provides, or for every meal that we provide, SNAP provides 9. And so this is not at the scale that we're going to be able to meet. And so part of the equation now is, are there additional investments that we can get from the state to try to help people absorb the loss of these critical benefits? We can't meet this need on our own. We're going to do everything we can, but I think we need our partners in state government to explore solutions to also think through how we can support people during this crisis.
Yeah, certainly a critical program for a lot of folks. Nolan Downey, Kenny Robinson, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. You can stream Chicago Tonight on our WTTW YouTube channel every evening and catch up on any programs you may have missed. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. What's at stake as the country waits for the Supreme Court to rule on President Trump's tariffs? Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm, righting the heaviest wrongs for more than 40 years.